Welcome to the SPL Rundown. I'm your host, Apam, here with AlphaJackal, Myflin, and Anatoliy to break down all of the Week 6 SPL games. Stick around a little bit later on for my interview with Neilmah, the support for the Oni Warriors. But first, we're always here to talk about last week's SPL, so we got to start where the week started last weekend. Oni Warriors versus the Valhalla Valkyries. I think Game 1 is probably some of the best Valkyrie smite we've really seen all season long. They really control the game until about 30 minutes. Lose a late FG, have maybe a bad Phoenix call after getting an enhanced Fire Giant. Just a little bit of the sort of final push is missing from them in Game 1. And Game 2, if you give the Oni Warriors an inch, they're gonna take the mile, and they don't even give the Valks a chance in Game 2. Do you think we're seeing improvements from this Valkyries roster as we saw, how they sort of controlled Game 1 up until about 30 minutes?
I think there are definite areas that they've improved on. I think their early game has gone better over the course of the year. They certainly look like they're playing a bit more as a team than they were in the past. Ducky's going even stronger in the solo lane, as we saw by his numerous solo kills, just out of absolutely nowhere. But they still have to find that consistency in the late game, and that's really been an absolute... It's been such a struggle for them to really find any form of form in the late game.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like the Valkyries are in a position right now where they're really improved inside of the early game, but it's very evident that they don't know what they want to do with the lead. Every single time they get 2,000 gold ahead, 3,000 gold ahead, it just feels like they're kind of spinning their wheels. They're waiting for the enemy to make another mistake. But when you have leads like that, you're not waiting for mistakes anymore. You have to create opportunities yourself. So that's why in Game 1, they controlled the first 30 minutes, sure, but they never generated threat on the map. They weren't going for proactive plays in that we're going for permanent objectives like the towers. We're going to force the enemy team to react and defend. Instead, it just kind of felt like they were grouping up on neutral objectives. They were going for low-risk plays like Gold Furies and Primal or Pyromancers, and they would get these like small wins and then push their lead even further and then kind of do nothing with it until eventually, as you said earlier, give the Warriors an inch, they'll take a mile. They gave them that inch. They let them come back into the game. They kind of allowed the pace to push itself to that post 30-minute mark where gold really starts to mean a lot less, and it doesn't really matter that you're 7,000 gold up. So I think the Valkyries certainly are improving, but I want to see them improve on different facets of their game. Before, they'd get blown out in the early. That's not the case anymore. Now we got to start looking a little bit later on. And in the Game 2, their mental was just kind of shattered. So, can't hold it to them. Yeah. They played the best game of their entire season and then lost. My mental would break too.
Sure. Oli, your thoughts?
Yeah, that Apollo jungle in game number 2 just wasn't it for Johnny, unfortunately. But yeah, like you guys mentioned, this is growing pains for the Valkyries. Their early game was improved. They wanted to get the objectives, but the Oni Warriors didn't make it easy for them. I think the Kivo on the Circuit was just in the backline like crazy. Zero struggle to maintain good positioning. The disengage just wasn't there for them, but then ultimately Oni Warriors just finally got in after a failed Phoenix Siege in game number 1. Game 2 as well, I just feel like the momentum that the Valks built up was all shattered at the last 2 minutes after that failed Phoenix Siege, and Apollo Jungle was just very much questionable to me. I didn't really understand the purpose of it. He ended something like the lowest player damage of the game, if I'm not mistaken, in that game. So that needs to be looked in the replays and just be scrapped under the rug. Just forget about that game entirely.
Yeah, when you have 500 damage less than Rapper on a support factor, it's not a good look. I did want to...
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I think the meta's just moved on from Apollo Jungle, and this is almost a wake-up call for Johnny to say this sort of pick will not work in the SPL anymore. Maybe down in the SCC it could still find some success, but not in the Big Boy League.
Yeah. I liked what you said about them not being proactive, but I think when the Valks tried to be proactive, they had enhanced Fire Giant, and they tried to siege this left Phoenix. It kind of bites them in the ass a little bit, and the siege disengage, they get the Phoenix, but the disengage isn't good, and 2 or 3 of the team members get wiped, and that, if you have enhanced Fire Giant, it needs to be a clean Phoenix, I feel like, So
Yeah.
they can be proactive, but like sometimes, you know, the results have to come too, right? You can't just be proactive for proactive sake.
But
that
even then, that
EFG
was so late, right? That was
Yeah.
so late in the game.
was.
And beyond that, and here's my recall coming into play. It's a little bit rough for earlier matches in the week, but I feel like they kind of split pushed that Phoenix and all in engaged off the initial. Like they didn't utilize the Fire Giant for sustain. Instead, they kind of just went straight into the Phoenix and then got immediately crushed on their push. I feel like they displayed so much patience up until that point in the match that it was a little bit jarring that all that patience went to the wind the second they got on the Phoenix line.
Sure.
Yeah. It's almost like the second they walked into the Phoenix, everyone was just full on committed rather than them getting some good poke off on a target, utilizing that Fire Giant sustain like we do see other teams do. They dance in, they dance out. It was straight up, no, we're going to go for the Phoenix now or we're just going to lose the game, and unfortunately that's what happened.
It was like a kid after Halloween, you know, that ate just too much candy all at once and then got a tummy ache because they didn't know what to do with the EFG. They were so lucky at first. If you guys remember, actually, it was a steal by Zeros's 4th hit of that Psycho Drum. So they were very lucky to even have gotten the objective in the first place. And then once they got it, they're like, oh no, what do we do with this? We haven't ever been in this position. So they just kind of like dropped all their candy on the floor.
I can't remember. Did Raffer Girdle use the Belt of Frenzy on that Phoenix push or not? I can't remember.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
He did.
100.
I imagine, you know, you think, oh, we have Fafnir, we have Enhanced Fire Giant, we can probably just, you know, get in there and get it done and leave. But, you know, not in the SPL. Not when, especially not against a team, you know, with like Neil and Cuvo, sort of, who have practice a lot in these base defenses and things like that. So
Nah, and I don't think you could do it against a god like a Cullen who's so effective at just diving into the backline and causing some disruption. They needed to, you know, try and bait out a couple of relics first before they go in. They just one in and out dip, and I think the entire game looks different.
But I am really impressed with the pacing from the Valkyries recently. I mean, it's almost a similar trajectory that we've seen from the Scarabs, in that the Scarabs have been generally getting a lot better, and then Roster Apocalypse, and then started getting a lot better after that as well, but it's been a constant increase throughout the year. I feel like the Valkyries kind of stagnated at pretty bad for a while, and then very recently it's been rapid improvements, and I think Game 1 from that set really exemplified that.
this is the Jade Dragons versus the Atlantis Leviathans. 3 sort of longer games, I would say. All the games were above 30 minutes in this one. Definitely a back and forth set. It almost looked like, you know, the Dragons control game 1, and then Levi's control game 2, and then game 3. Not a great base defense from the Levi's. I think they give up probably too many Fire Giants. You know, just not able to contest the neutral objectives as well as you want the Levi's too in game 3. You know, Dragons, I think, are sort of coming back from a bit of a midseason slump. I think a couple weeks ago they were, you know, 3-3 at the start of phase 2, and now they've had a couple good weekends of just winning both their sets. So kind of, I think, good signs for both of these teams. Is that sort of how you guys are feeling here?
Yeah, I think this was a highly entertaining and quite competitive set as we expected it to be. Some things I didn't expect. I didn't expect to see Nike Jungle make a resurgence. Certainly didn't expect to see an Izanami pick up, both of which happened in the first game. But it worked out for the Jade Dragons. They've obviously been practicing some slightly unorthodox picks. They've been studying what will make certain gods tick very well in this meta, and it's shown the research and the dedication that they put into finding these sorts of things. That's just a hallmark of PBM teams in the past and will always be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that this set is very similar to the majority of Leviathans versus Dragons sets, where each match in of itself is kind of like its own ecosystem, right? Like where everything kind of shifts up between games. Game 1, the Dragons have a pretty successful match. Game 2, Leviathans come back. Game 3, Jade Dragons, I think, play their style at the peak of their style. It really looked like a Dragon/Ghost Gaming kind of winning condition, in that they get a small lead early and they just keep posing difficult questions. Do you want to fight over these mid camps? Are you willing to defend your blue buff? Are you willing to step up to the gold free even though you're 2,000 gold down? And I think in game 3 in particular, the Leviathans kind of didn't take the test. They didn't decide to answer the questions. They pulled back a little bit. They're like, all right, we're only 2,000 gold down. It doesn't really matter if the Dragons get a Gold Fury, but it would really suck if we defend the Gold Fury, die, and they get the Gold Fury, so they just don't show up. And then it was like a death of 1,000 cuts where the Dragons just walk throughout the match. And if memory serves, it was a pretty low kill game in game 3. I want to say it was like 20 kills maybe in about 30 minutes, which
was 20 kills. Yeah, I think all the games were pretty low kill, and that sort of seems to be a hallmark of some of the higher end teams in the SPL, is just really focusing on just getting the kill that you can get, and never. I think a lot of what we see is they don't take these 50-50 plays, even on picks, right? Like, even if you have a pick and someone is sort of caught out, unless it's 90-10, I think a lot of or 90-10 sort of in your favor to get the kill. I think a lot of high-end teams are willing to maybe leave some kills on the table and, wait until a more impactful team fight can be set up for them. Do you guys feel that way, too?
Maybe most teams. The Dragons, I think, are a little kill hungry at times. Or the Leviathans, if they're just about to end a game, then they become kill hungry savages. But besides that, generally very clinical play. I don't know. I feel like the Dragons are a team that kind of play for the spectators in a sense that they're either going to win fast or they're going to lose fast. And I think it speaks volumes that the Leviathans are able to kind of break that pace and force longer games. Because that's not what the Dragons are looking for. Like, they're going for these risky plays consistently, and it's a treat to watch these two, as they're almost complete opposites in how they approach the game.
Yeah, like the very first kill that we saw in game number 1 was actually the Dragons trying to kill Rongu in that mid lane. Sam jumps in over the wall. He doesn't get his ulti off, fortunately, because Shinto gets off the Sigil Mastery CC, so he gets blown up instantly. And this game, I think, was thematic in the sense of it was the Tiamat versus the Morgan Le Fay. Game 1, Heroine's Tiamat popped off. I think he was like 5-0-6 top player damage. Game number 2, it was Shinto's turn with that god, and then game 3, Leviathans were like, all right, we're just gonna ban it away. So Heroine picks up the Morgan Le Fay. He didn't have like the best showing in terms of the top player damage, but he made a big impact. Only had 1 death. His positioning was really good that game. He brought a big impact, and I think Heroine is always underlooked. He always is considered like, this guy that sits under tower or only one trick with a Giannis, but honestly, he could play any god, and he brings a sick impact to this team. Unfortunately for game 3, though, for the Leviathans, it was a lot of bullying onto Rongyu's Ymir. My man had very little room to breathe that game, and then the Winions ultimately led to the Leviathans' downfall.
You did talk about Heroine. I think one thing that Heroine maybe doesn't get enough credit for, especially, is playing new gods basically as soon as they're available. And I think that definitely shows sort of his commitment to the game, to be able to practice these gods, even in scrims or maybe not even in scrims, and then bring them out, on SPL game day and still feel at least comfortable on him. I think that's something we've seen Hurry do all throughout his career, I think.
I mean, at this level, listen, you have to have your old faithfuls in the back pocket like he does, but then you also have to bring in the new hotness when the time calls for it, because teams that don't adapt the quickest are going to fall behind. And consistently since like season 6, PBM, Panic Cat, and the boys, they were consistently a top 3 team, no matter what phase it was. They weren't winning worlds, but hey, finally the Zadman curse is broken after the set, right? Like season 5 worlds, it was Zadman's trifecta against E United that they fell. Season 6, 7 as well. So maybe this could be the start where Jade Dragons gets that confidence moving forward.
Yeah.
To speak to Hurrywin in particular, I feel like it's almost a disservice to talk how good he is, because that implies that we don't already all know.
Sure. Yeah.
Hurry's nuts. I'm speaking directly to you, Reddit. I know you guys watch this show. Stop bullying Hurrywins. He's so good. He's not the weak link of the Dragons. Leave him alone. Dude's an actual beast. He's been having a great year.
Yeah, he definitely has. All right, let's get to the next set of the week. This is sort of upset central, I guess, in my book. The Kings upset the Bolts, end the streak. The streak killers here, I guess, are the Camelot Kings. I think in 2 very convincing games here to win the set from the Kings. Just really methodical. Variety, I think, is, really playing very, very well from the solo lane. Almost carrying these games by himself, I feel like sometimes. I think there was a Jing Chen ult in game 2 of this set, where he just rotates mid, and it's like a 3-man ult, and, if Jing Chen is getting 3 people in the ult, that's a fight that you're going to win. a lot of the time. So that was my main takeaway from this. Is this sort of been the variety show this weekend for the Kings?
I think certainly in this set, it was variety stood out as one of the standout players. I think Bolts came into this set a little bit underprepared for variety's Hell in particular. And if there's a Hell in the solo lane, you have to try and pressure, have to try and force it out, have to try and put it behind before they can get a lot of impact out in that mid and late game. And Variety only died once throughout the entire game.
Yeah.
Like that's something which shouldn't really be happening to a Hell solo if you're trying to win this game in any form of fashion. You have to try and win quickly or win in the late game with the Hell being behind, and they just couldn't do anything.
Yeah, they let that Hell free farm, if memory serves. I mean, Variety was just chilling over there. And I remember, I think the casters at the time even said it, like, yo, why is Variety just like goose eggs across the board like 12 minutes into this game? That shouldn't happen. Someone should be over there trying to force a kill onto him, but instead I think the Bolts maybe tossed a little bit more respect towards big man things, because the Camelot Kings in game 1 kind of draft 2 ticking time bombs. Do you want to deal with a late game Hell, or do you want to play against late game Tiamat? Damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of situation. And they decided, we're going to try and shut down big man Tings, and I think they got a couple of kills, but not really enough to keep it rolling. And Genetics eventually was able to rotate through, and when you have to only protect one guy who's getting consistently dove, and in game 1 that was big man Ting, Scarab's Blessing, Khepri's ultimate is kind of a pretty sick tool for it. I think the Kings kind of just won on draft, and maybe in particular a player from the Bolts that needed to step up in game 1 that wasn't quite there was Lasber. I feel like the jungle pressure was pretty low, but jungle kind of sucks right now, so I'll leave it up to that.
Yeah, ticking time bomb is a very accurate statement. You can't forget about Netroid's ROM as well. Every time Lasber would go in, he would get blown up completely. Jake struggled a little bit on the Ares. The Hell got the power item spikes that she needed. She got Breastplate of Valor, Lotus Crown, and then wrap it up. Bolts just goes down for the first time, and the Kings keep the Epsilon streak going. And it wasn't as if that the Bolts didn't get the early game pressure, because they did invade the blue buff a couple of times. They even first blooded Captain Twig at the level 3 or 4 marker, but it just wasn't enough momentum because that Hell did go too much unchecked. You gotta like literally sit in that Hell's lane to kill her like 3-4 times. I think she only had 1 death up until that 10-minute mark, and by that time it's just too little too late. The healing was just too much to handle.
Yeah, and that 1 death wasn't even a gank in lane. It was a team fight that sort of, well, almost a skirmish that broke out near the back camps, sort of in between the Fire Giants and the back camps. And that was the only time that Variety fell, and the only time that Variety even looked like he was uncomfortable in that game.
I had a thought here, but it is escaping me currently. I will say, Big Man Tings only died once on that Tiamat in game 1, so I think the Scarab's Blessings must have been on point, right?
Had to.
The draft as well. Like back to Myflin's point, you're trying to go up against a Hell who's building tanky in the solo lane, who's going to be able to cleanse and help keep people alive during the fight. You go up against Tiamat, probably the most difficult to kill mage in the game because of how tanky she is as well. So the mages are just in your face, difficult to kill, and dealing too much damage to your backliners for them to retaliate. What do you do against that? You can't really do anything against that when your peel is Ares and King Arthur.
Oh, and there's a Khepri in the back as well.
Yeah.
Just in case.
Love that. Love that for them.
Yeah, yeah. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, what happened?
About this set? You go ahead.
What happened in game 2? I feel like game 2, we haven't talked about it at all here yet. The Bolts kind of like, they looked asleep. They looked asleep at the wheel a little bit. They did not get a whole lot of kills that game. The duo lane, I remember, was struggling in particular, because I was like joking around in the green room. I was like, man, does Barra Jake suck? Obviously they don't suck. That is just a joke. I'm going to put my hands up before the fans get to me for it. But I feel like when you have a duo lane like Horus and Artemis together, you're kind of relying on that lane to do very well. I mean, that is incredibly aggressive, and you've got the best in slot Hunter. You got to think that it synergizes well, just because Fracture from Horus into Transgressor's Fate is like 4 seconds of CC at level 1, which is pretty crazy. But the Bolts struggled there, and because they had such an immobile backline, it was Morrigan, LaFay, and Artemis together, kind of made it pretty easy for the Kings to dive when they needed to. And with the draft that they had, they didn't really need to dive too often. I mean, Netroid on that ROM again, is just able to snipe from so far away. And then big man Tings with a Khepri in his back pocket is so survivable that the frontline dive of the Olympus Bolts were struggling mightily to get there.
Yeah, when I was reviewing the tape, I actually noticed that the Bolts started to slip up around the Gold Fury where I think they get one kill, and then Barra tanks that Gold Fury for a little bit too long. Netroid sees the health pool, goes up in the air, gets a guaranteed snipe, and then Jake couldn't really get away from Big Man Tings' arrow.
Big snipes.
Yeah, a bit of foreshadowing here from you, Myf, about this might have been Awesome Jake's, maybe his worst weekend so far, I think, in Season 8. But we'll focus on that a little bit more in the second Bolts set. Any final thoughts here from you guys on the Kings versus Bolts here? I think the honor of EU is still maintained here because the Epsilon record still stands. I'm sure all the EU boys on the Kings have to feel very good about that. Holding it down for their boys.
The defender of the record, the defender of the streak, as Big Man Tings put it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can tell that the Kings were like really hyped for this game. At the end of game number 2, when you saw the player cams, like,
oh yeah,
Twigs' arms was in the air, Variety was screaming.
Well, what did he scream, Tully? Do you know what he said?
No, I have no idea, actually. I'm sure you guys have it recorded in the background. But either way, this reminded me a little bit almost of Season 3 Obey Alliance, Twig and Variety, except instead of aggressive gods that Variety played, like the Thanatos, Retatasker, Tier, he's going for more defensive style with the Hell and the Xing Shen, but the same kind of high tier effort and level executed.
Yeah. Next set of the week here is the Tartarus Titans versus the Solar Scarabs. And we have to mention Layers was played for the Titans for this weekend. I don't know if it is a permanent substitution, but it looks like Scary doesn't really want to play jungle anymore. I think he posted on Twitter that he's going back to the solo lane. Bit of a sort of revenge set here, I guess, for Layers versus the old squad on the Solar Scarabs. And I think the Titans, I hate to say this because I love Scary D, I love Ronnie, but Titans look a lot better with Layers in the jungle, and they take the win pretty easily, I want to say. Layers just does, some jungle things, and of course Benji is Benji, and he basically carries game 1 and 2, right? So, I think when they have someone who just knows how to move in the jungle, sort of Aztec in nature, it just made everything flow. Is that sort of how you guys are feeling?
I think this set, you can't really say that it's like, oh yeah, Layers is so much better than Scary D, because the Titans were beating the Scarabs either way. Like Layers regardless, right? But sure. I think my main standout in this one, and I legitimately said it during the cast, was I think Cyclone Spin just straight up doesn't like Stewart. He was playing so disrespectful in lane. Yeah. It was disgusting, the things that he was doing. I mean, sitting on the tier 2 tower in the SPL on your own against somebody is almost something you don't see anymore. Like, that's a relic of a bygone age. That's Season 3 strats. You're just establishing dominance there, and Stewart really couldn't keep up. And even when he has the aggressive god advantage, I think in game 2 it was on her versus Rom or something.
Yeah,
I mean,
it was.
Stewart looked like the cowardly lion. He was just running away the entire time. Layers sure does look good with this team, but I think that jungle in the state that it is right now is also a little bit plug and play. As long as you're clearing your buffs and showing up for the expected fights, you're probably going to do just fine. But I think that Layers certainly has a talent to play on a squad like the Titans. I think it's always been the intangibles, the things outside the play field that has kind of held him back in his competitive career. So I've never been one to be concerned about his play in an actual match. And Layers certainly plays to the strengths of his team here. He played a much more facilitator role, allowed Cyclone Spin to be that guy, that bully in lane, and kind of dialed himself back a little bit. It was a much more subdued style from him, kind of just fitting into the team. Or maybe that's first week jitters. I'm not sure. Either way, you're right though. The Titans win very quickly and convincingly.
Yeah,
I'll say almost.
Go ahead, AlphaJackal. Sorry.
I was like, almost in game 1, it's almost like he was just giving it a little bit of a feel for things by playing the Awelix, just being a bit more of that facilitator role, a bit of a counter engage. But then the second game, he was all in with just playing a super aggressive god, just playing in the face of the Solar Scarabs, just saying, "This is why you should not have kicked me. This is why I deserve to be on an SPL team permanently." And he makes them pay with the Erlang Shen. It's not a god that we see too often, but with the performance that Les put in, you might see some other junglers in the SPL start to look at that pick again.
Yeah, yeah. Oli, your thoughts?
I would have to agree with everything there. Layers game number 1, it was more of a counter pick into the Yamoja and the Gilgamesh during that draft. And Cyclone Spin, he had a great power spike play. Looking back at the replay, level 6, he finishes Ichavolt. He uses his ulti to go back into the lane as soon as Stewart still only has his short bow. Bullies him out completely, forces him to miss a wave, and then Cyclone Spin never looked back. He consistently had that 2-level lead and then just ran away with it. And also, his build, I feel like he just feels like building whatever he wants to build. Like, I think he was one of the first hunters to introduce the bow build, right? So he starts off with the Ichavolt and the Atlantis bow, and then he transitions into crit, Wind Demon and Deathbringer, and then just does whatever he wants with that lead.
Yeah, yeah. It is a bit of sort of rookie hazing, I think, right? From these other SPL players. You gotta just show Stewart what it's like to actually be in the big leagues a little bit, right, Myf?
I think.
Yeah, that's what it looked like, man. I mean, honestly, it reminds me of my first time in the SPL. Omega actually messaged me after whooping me, and my boys. He says, "Yeah, it's not as easy as ranked, is it?" And that's kind of the energy I got from Cyclone Spin's performance in this one.
Sure.
Power to him, though. Poor Stewart.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off there, AJ.
No, that's fine. I was thinking that the build that Cyclone Spin does in those games, where it goes into that crit, I could see that being more of a staple build than just going full bows, because it gives you the sort of the best of both worlds. It gives you quite high attack speed, gives you quite high DPS versus squishy gods in the early game, can start to transition more into even more attack speed in that sort of mid and late game, but also means that you do objectives quite quickly still with the crit. Because that was probably one of the only drawbacks of this full bow build, is that you did Fire Giant in an age compared to the crit build. So just getting that mix of a best of both worlds, I think you'll start to see the crit build creep back into things a little bit.
Any thoughts here on the Solar Scarabs? You think it's just a bit of growing pains with Scream back in the jungle? I think they did try to sort of make some moves early on, but in both of these games, but it didn't really pan out for them. Do you sort of expect more sets like this for the Scarabs going forward, or do you think that they would have showed up a little bit better versus this Titans team?
I could see them taking a couple weeks to get things sorted and get things into place, because they did lose their sort of figurehead shot caller in Zapman, and they still have to try and figure out where that leadership void is going to best settle, whether it's going to go onto Scream, whether it's going onto Inbound, or whether it's just a mix of everybody making the calls and they just decide as a team what to do best. So I'd say it's going to be a rough next couple weeks for the Scarabs, but after which, when you have the talent on their team, you can expect them to bounce back good.
Yeah, just in time for Phase 3, right?
Hopefully.
Just in time.
I think Phase 3 is only a couple weeks away.
Yeah, there's only 2 more weeks, I believe.
Yeah, playoffs is coming right up.
Yeah, so couple weeks of growing pains, and then you're good for Phase 3 and the sort of pathway to Worlds, right? Any final thoughts from you, Myf or Toli, about this Titans versus Scarab set?
I don't think that this is going to be the final roster for this team. I think they have still a lot to learn. You could tell that the last couple of seconds of both of these games, where Scream was either AFKing in the fountain in a 1v5, like obviously he's not going to do anything 1v4, 1v5 in either of those games. But the fact that he's last man standing, not doing anything in game 1, and then last man standing game number 2, running away as Hunbats as they're chasing him past the Phoenix, just shows like the kind of investment level. Like you could see the player behavior and stuff like that. I feel as though if you're going to play, like you have to play till the end, right? Like you can't just give up like that at the end, even though he wouldn't have done anything anyway. He's like protecting his stats, right?
Sure. So you're saying there might be more roster changes for the Scarabs?
I just feel like, there's still like quite a bit to learn from them. And I don't know how much they're actually committed, I guess is the right word here, together, at least committed as the team that they currently have.
I will say though, Scream is the driving force behind the Scarabs right now. When the early game is looking good for the Scarabs, it's almost entirely Scream.
Yeah.
I do think that not attempting to defend the base in a 1v5 is a little bit sus. It's like, you're protecting your stats, sure, but Scream just does so much for this team that I struggle to put anything at his feet as an issue for this team right now. I think, if anything, when you've got a shining star like Scream on your team, the rest of the boys should be offering up everything they have, making sure that Scream's comfortable. Do you want my mid waves? Do you want my mid harpies? Back camps, you solo the red buff. If you need a water, I'll clean your mouse. Like, whatever it needs to be. That should be the mentality right now for the Scarabs, because that's how good Scream's looking.
The thing is, like, if he's going to be the leader, I don't know if they designated him as the leader. He needs to lead with an example. You know, he has to go down with the sinking ship and be that captain of this team.
Maybe. I'm not sure that he's a shot caller. I think he's just out there to be your like Kobe, your Michael Jordan, just your mechanical guy. But I agree that it's not a good look and it doesn't reflect well on him. But damn, he's good.
He is good.
Yeah.
He is good.
No disagreements there. That's for sure.
All right, let's move on to the next set of the week. I think I just closed the tab on it. It is the Jade Dragons versus the Valhalla Valkyries. This one might be the quickest discussion we really have this week. The Valks just can't get anything started. It felt like a stalling car almost. You know, they like try to do something and it's just like suffocated by the Jade Dragons before they even have a chance to even think about making the play, so to speak. It feels like, and Jade Dragons end both of these games before 25 minutes. I don't know if we will see a more dominating performance. We probably will. I couldn't hold my breath on seeing a more dominating performance than this. I think we've probably seen some other dominating performances that were better than this one already this season, but just an unfortunate situation, I think, for the Valks, and a pretty expected win from the Jade Dragons, right?
Set one as expected. That's pretty much everything we need to say, I think.
No viewer points lost anywhere on the planet. Nobody was voting Valks. They got Jazzberry jammed. I mean, full stop.
Sure. Tully?
Yeah, Dragons look back at the tape against the Warriors, and they were not going to let Tucky do the same thing the way that he handled Nika in that last game. Final K goes Athena game 1, Vamana game 2, and, he was just chilling. He had great performances, which is kind of rare, actually, for Final K.
Yeah.
Hey, what about that Skadi pick, though, in game number 1? That's
I was just about to mention the
certainly
Skadi pick.
spicy.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Did not expect to see Skadi. Really didn't expect to see Skadi, and especially didn't expect to see Skadi with the build that PandaCat didn't end up going for in the end, which is, going into the Archival, then into the Devourer's Gauntlets.
It's a weird build.
It is a little bit, but it does make sense of the fact that it gives you a fair bit of power and boxing potential. So I can see why it's a build path chosen, but it's still very awkward for me to see a Skadi in competitive play, especially when it does well.
I think they have enough setup. Yeah, they had enough setup for the Skadi to make it work there. There's so many beads burners, Ymir, Hunbats, Athena. Like, whoever's beads are down, they're getting Skadi ulted and rooted in place and dying to all that physical power. I like the idea of the Athena Skadi side lanes, so that way PandaCat can play aggressive against Emilito. Emilito is not one to shy down from a boxing situation, even when it doesn't favor him, so you can kind of use that to your advantage, especially when you have an Athena global.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, or do we say all that needs to be said about the Jade Dragons versus the Valkyries here?
They got jammed.
Yeah, they got jammed. Yeah. It is the Atlantis Leviathans versus the Oni Warriors. And game 1 here was all Leviathans all the way. I think they blanked the Oni Warriors, don't even give them a kill. 16-0 in game 1. Game 2 looks a lot better for the Oni Warriors, I think. But, still, it was a very slow game until about 15 minutes. I don't even think there was kills until 16 minutes into the game. And then it was a bit of a Game of Thrones at the end there. Both teams kind of throwing around fire giant fights and trying to end and then not ending. And it was I a classic. I call it a classic Zapman game. Is what I want to say. I feel like I've seen a lot of games that end up in this sort of back and forth. Are we going to go for the base? Should we go for the base? Let's go for the base. Let's end it. You know, sort of games from Zapman teams. But Leviathans, I think, do end up getting the win that I think most people expected here. Any thoughts here? We do see sort of Apollo in the Hunter role, not the jungle role from Boat in Game 2 that was good but wasn't great, and Leviathans end up with the set win.
Yeah, I think there was 3 kills before the 16-minute mark in the second game, but it certainly wasn't compared to the next 20, in which point I think about 40 kills happened, or 35 or something ridiculous like that in the space of 20 minutes.
Yeah.
It just exploded that game, the second one, into life, and I think the Leviathans played it perfectly given their composition. They aggressed early, but not too much that they could throw it. And then when they got into the late game, they let their late game carries thrive in Seven played Cupid and Shinto on that Morgan Le Fay.
Came down to the jungle pressure from Pan and Tum, honestly. Cyrus game number 1, Gilgamesh game number 2. These basic attack junglers, I think, is his bread and butter. And also, I think in game number 1, there must have been like some sort of funny bet where it's like first one to die was going to owe some drinks probably to somebody else. And he could tell, Ryan buying the rounds. And Zapman did not want to die. He almost died at the very end, but luckily he remembered he had relics. So he managed to survive that time.
It's rare for him.
Yeah, game 1 honestly was like it's my pet peeve in Smite. It's something that the Renegades used to do last year, where if they fall behind, they do that thing where you just, all right, I don't want to lose. I don't care if we win. I just don't want to lose. I'm gonna hang back, do what you got to do on the map. Hands up. You want gold free, you want pyro, you want towers. They're yours. And that kind of felt like how the Warriors were playing. They were playing to not lose rather than win. They get goose egged at the very end of the match. Unfortunate. Game 2 though, I think speaks volumes just to the Oni Warriors' mental. It's not easy to sit through like a 25-ish minute goose egg match and then say, all right, let's get back in there. Let's play another game of Smite. Let's try our hardest. And that's exactly what they did. I mean, it was a very contested match for the first 15 minutes, and that was before there was a ton of kills. After that, I would say the Leviathans kind of were in control the entire time. Sure, they got a couple pushes stopped with their Fire Giant trying to siege Phoenixes, but what happened when the Warriors stopped that siege? They got a tier 1 tower, maybe, like a Gold Fury, that late in the game. Not the biggest deal. It felt like the Leviathans knew what the risks were when they make these plays, and they were within the realm of acceptable losses. All right, if we lose this siege, we lose a tower, let's go for it. And I like seeing that type of play from them because it's not something they do often. It feels like the Leviathans are always kind of going for that. Either it's a 100%er or I'm not trying. This time, they were like, okay, let's play with the numbers a little bit. Let's see what we can do. And they looked very good for it.
Willie, I wanted to ask you about the solo lane builds here, since you are a well-known solo laner. We see in game 1 2 Guardians, and they both go the tyrannical plate helm here. Is that something you think we'll see more of for these Guardians? I think this is sort of the first time I remember seeing both solo laners pick up this tyrannical plate helm.
I actually love this item. I build it on a lot of my Guardians in the solo lane because if you ever manage to bully the enemy, and you actually win a lot of matchups with Vamp Shroud, Tyrannical Plate Helmet, and then when you get the tier 1 tower, once you get to that tier 2 tower, if you're still pushing it, your archers are going to survive 2 tower hits instead of 1. So that's actually a huge bonus towards sieging those towers if you have that kind of pressure. And there are some guns that can win your lane, like Bracken and Cerberus, as we saw in game 1, number 1, but there's also the Artio and the Xing Chen that could do the similar builds and run the lane with that build. I want to see more of that build. I'm not sure how confident some of these Guardians are about executing that build, but it's a personal favorite of mine.
Sure. The Camelot Kings versus the Solar Scarabs. I think, we mentioned the Hell solo in the first Kings set of the week, but here come really the solo lane healers. We see a Hell versus Afro matchup, which is, I don't know, that's a big throwback, right? In the solo lane. And,
that's when I was playing, man.
Yeah, back when Tolly was playing. I think, the Scarabs, like you said, they're building on things. I think game 2 for them, the early game looked fairly solid, and then the healers come into play, and I think this that really solidified Variety as having maybe one of his best weekends so far, at least in Phase 2, the best weekend he's had for the Kings. I think he just, is not just doing whatever he wanted, but he just seemed in control of sort of the team fights and every aspect of his matchup in the solo lane, and was able to, I feel like, influence a lot of the game just by, doing the right thing at the right time, which is good to see from Variety. So, I want to know what your thoughts are on the solo healer meta, if we can call it a meta. I think we've basically only seen it in one set, and then, your thoughts on how the Kings did versus the Scarabs, or how the Scarabs are improving.
I mean, this is another clear example of the Scarabs improving, but maybe not exactly as a team. Instead, Scream getting some of that rust off again. I feel like this was another set for the Scarabs that was really driven by Scream, and I think Game 2 looking better for the Scarabs might just be because Scream had a pocket Aphrodite the entire time. I mean, he just hung out inside of the soul lane and took fights there consistently. It felt like to me the Scarabs played against the Kings, saw Variety on the Hell, took a couple fights in the late game, got washed by healing, and said, "Wow, this kind of sucks. This isn't fun. Let's just do that. Let's try that." And instead of sticking to their own strategy and sticking to their own identity as a squad, they kind of tried to adapt to what the Kings were doing. And when you play somebody else's game, you're probably not going to be as good at it. And once we did get to that late game team fight phase, despite the Scarabs winning out so handily in the early game, Game 2, thanks to the efforts of Scream and SOT, and even a solo kill from Baronic, if memory serves, which was pretty sick up against Big Man Tings, they kind of fell apart in a true 5-on-5 engagement, just because Variety is playing so much better around his backline than what we saw from SOT in those late game team fights, or maybe it's just the AoE healing diff. But that said, I think the Scarabs really should just stick to that strategy. And honestly, if they want to keep SOT on Aphrodite and keep practicing with that, and just keep them on Scream, like, I'm fine with that. Like, run. That's a good strat.
Yeah, when I think of SOT, I don't think of these passive healers. He made a name for himself playing these aggressive W key warriors that just runs at your face and makes you cry under your own tower. But I think that he's a skilled enough player to adapt to a healing meta if his team chooses to do so, with Scream playing Fenrir consistently in both games. He had the early game in game number 2, but yet again, that ticking time bomb, the Kings were able to get the Mercury online for Twig. The ROM for Netroid popped off in game number 2. So I think if you're going to worry about the Hell, it has to be one of the side lanes. You can't let the ROM and the Hell transition safely into the side lanes. You have to choose one and heavily punish it to get it out of the equation and control that side of the map.
Yeah, just how disgusting is a late game team comp with Mercury, Yanis, Hell, and Ram? Like, what do you do against that? The second you get close to any single one of those late game hypercarries, Yanis just portals them out. Like, there's almost no fight in that team comp in the late game unless you have an Odin. I'm swearing by that.
I do want to mention what Twig said, I think, in the post-game interview here. He just said, first he said jungle was in a bad place, which I think we could all agree about. But he also said that when these healers just build, physical protections from the get-go, there's no point even going to gank the solo lane if there are healers there as a physical jungler, because you're just going to die. And I think we sort of saw that play out in this set, basically for both teams. Anytime a jungler tried to come gank, it didn't look like it went too well. So I think that'll be interesting to see how the solo meta sort of evolves, because it is a copycat league to some extent, and we'll see in the next set that Addix picks up a Hell and doesn't look too good. So
I hope not. God, keep being Chaddix. Play King Arthur. Like, it's so much more fun to watch for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think Twig was referencing the earlier set against the Bolts where he was struggling against that Gilgamesh and King Arthur combo where his blue buff was getting stripped away. It's not about necessarily trying to kill the enemy soul laner. It's more about like how you can strip away their buffs and their neutral alpha heartbeats and go from there.
Sure.
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily kill them. You just have to take away farm as much as possible. If you can put them low and force them to back at an awkward time, that's great. Just constantly invade on that blue buff, constantly take away the heartbeat, like you said, and eventually you can find yourself with a level or 2 lead, and at that point you can then start to get all the objectives in that side of the jungle and put them even further behind.
Maybe get your guys' takes on, this is sort of post-Benevolence Nerf, and I think we've basically seen all the supports picking up the Sentinel's gift and then going into the blessing for the most part, except for some Fafnirs here and there, like in the extra gold from the Sentinel's boon to get their protections of the passive easier. Do you think Benevolence will ever come back? I mean, there still is free gold on it, right, to some extent? Or is it now a bit of a gentleman's agreement between all these teams to just say, hey, let's not mess with this, let's play some fair smite?
Man, I think Flareboot released a pie chart or something like that that shows that you don't get the value of but buying Benevolence until like level 17 or something like that, which is pretty late in the game. I think if Benevolence comes back, it's either going to see a rework or maybe just like a shift in the stats to make it a little bit better at different things. Because right now, I just don't think it's valuable. You just get so much more from Sentinel's Gift. Not only do you get way more sustain, but you've got great upgrade pass as well. Benevolence is just a little bit outshined. Unless you're aiming for animosity. If your goal is animosity, you kind of got to buy Benevolence, right?
Yeah.
I think mathematically, if you're always on time to get assists from the wave, that Sentinel's Gift gives you over 5 gold per minute. So in the early game, it actually ramps you up pretty high. And after those Benevolence nerfs you mentioned, it's the better macro game where if you're trying to ramp your build faster to get the Sentinel's Gift. I don't think Benevolence is going to really see another appearance in a long time. And then even with the nerf towards animosity in the future, in patch 8.8, where it goes from 4% to 3%. We're not even really going to see that anymore in the solo lane, I feel.
Any thoughts from you, AJ, or shall we move on to the last set of the week?
No, I think they both hit it on the head there. It's kind of rough for that item, and there definitely could be a rework for it. Hopefully there will be, because it's always very difficult to implement items into the game that give you free experience and free gold, because other classes will just abuse that to the point where it becomes almost unviable.
At OG Sentinels, at Midas Boots, at like I think it was called Silver Fox Girdle or something like that. Totally, you should know. That's old school.
I don't know that one. I joined when Scylla was released. I don't know.
Yeah, that's 700 health item. God.
Jesus.
Yeah, so anytime there's a passive spooling, it's super hard to balance. That's why I hope if we do see Benevolence come back, it's post rework, not post buff.
Yeah.
All right, let's finish up the last set of week 6. The Titans versus the Olympus Bolts. Bit of an unfortunate set here from the Bolts. I think Jake kind of got picked on a little bit in all of these games, but especially game 3, I want to say. A little bit picked on. And the Bolts kind of have maybe their worst week so far this season. You know, dropping both of these games, especially sort of on the precipice of getting a record. It's got to be, a hit to the mental at the very least. They are able to take one game, the Bolts are, but, the Titans just look, I don't know, it just seems like the spigot is open. I said they plugged layers in and everything is flowing. That really seems to be the case here versus the Bolts. Are you worried about the Bolts at all? Losing 2 sets this week? Is that something you guys are concerned about, or is this sort of just the motivation that they might need to take it to the next level?
Personally, I'm not concerned for the Bolts, right? When it rains, it pours.
Yeah.
First loss probably going to be followed by another one. I think, if anything, what you should take away from this set is beforehand, maybe you're like, okay, well, Tartarus Titans beat the Scarabs with players. Who cares? I mean, they were winning that either way. Taking a game or even an entire set off the Bolts, I think, is very big and very indicative of how Layers fits into this team and even comes into his own at a point in this set. And I think it was game 3 where he makes a great winning play to solo push the Titan while the rest of his team is going for a Fire Giant skirmish. I thought that takes cojones to go for that play, because if you lose out on that fight, you're losing that Fire Giant push as well. You're essentially ceding the next 5 to 10 minutes of the match. Instead, says, I think I can do it, and then does it and performs on it. Very impressive. But I said it after this set to all the other casters. I think that this was the Bolts playing at like 70% of their potential. It really felt like that first loss of the week kind of shook them up a little bit. And to speak to your point, is one of the worst performances we've seen from Jake so far, but Jake has been so consistently great for this team that I'm not willing to hold it against him.
To answer your question earlier, if I'm worried about the Bolts, I would be worried depending on who they lost to. If they lost to the Scarabs and the Valkyries, I would be really worried. But they lost to the Kings and the Titans. So not only were the Bolts overdue for a loss, the Kings and the Titans were overdue for a win as well. Like they weren't playing up to their standards. So they played up. And unfortunately for the Bolts, after their crazy long win streak, they played a little bit down from what we're all expecting. Now it's up to the rest of them to see how they handle that bounce back. This is going to truly test their mental fortitude going into their next set. And I think their next set is actually against the Scarabs, if I'm not mistaken. So they're still fine in terms of making the playoffs. I don't think that they're out of the running for that top 6 spot. So no, I'm not worried for the Bolts in the slightest.
Yeah, next week they're playing the Scarabs on Thursday, and then they're playing the Dragons on Sunday. So one game to bounce yourself back to prepare you for a monumental test against the Resurgent Dragons next week. But I don't fear for the Bolts. I think that like Tolly said, they were overdue for a loss, and there are always going to be weeks where you're just not on the same page, or you're just not on the same rhythm that you're usually on, or weeks where you have a dip in performance from 1 or 2 players. That's fine. It's just having that happen at the right times, and this is probably one of those times where you go, okay, it's fine for us to have had a dip in performance now, rather than at a crunch moment like on qualifiers for Worlds or even at the World stage.
Any thoughts on the Titans in this set? I think, game 1 was a very convincing win from them. I think it's like 10 kills to 1 kill. So, that's a great performance from the Titans. And I think game 3 is a similar thing, 12 kills to 3 kills for the Titans. Is this something that is going to be sort of like, what's it called? Is this a hint of where the Titans are going to go? And do you think that this sort of a tryout weekend for Layers means that he has a more permanent spot going forward?
Is that something that we've heard? Because a lot of people have said to me that Layers might be on the way out or something along those lines. But everything to my knowledge right now is that he's playing for this team. And if that's the case, he's looking good. But sure, roster changes happening as rapidly as they have been recently. And with new addition to the league, Scream being as popular as he is, maybe you start to think, well, maybe Scream wants a little bit of an upgrade here and kind of snakes Layers twice in a row, if you would. I think, oh man, maybe I put a little suggestion in the Hindu Man script box there, because that would be so juicy. But I think that the Titans are very likely to continue growing right now, because Layers is legitimately just a better jungler than Scary D was. Not a better player by any stretch, or maybe he could be, depending on how you value what they're able to bring to a team. But certainly Soul Lane Scary D 2-time for a reason. I think that the Titans, though, needed a jungler. I mean, that's the role he's filling right now, and it's looking a lot better for them as a team.
I actually mentioned it last week on the show that, yeah, I think that Scream was probably more destined to join the Titans. So, and with the way that he's been playing last week at the end of the games for the Scarabs, makes me think that he's not all-in invested towards the Scarabs, or at least showing that he's all-in invested towards the Scarabs. So I wouldn't be surprised personally if Scream jumps ship. So I would jump ship and given that opportunity. If I were to think like, does Titans have a better shot at winning Worlds than the Scarabs? Absolutely. Given that stacked roster, I think that they're a very aggressive team. Scream is very aggressive. If you remember how he played for E United back in Season 4, and he used to team with Benji as well during that championship run. So I think he'd be right at home with the Titans.
If you are Scream and you do have the opportunity to join the Titans, it's not just about do they have a chance of winning Worlds. You have a chance of going for something immediately, because I believe the Scarabs will have to pretty much win all their sets from now on to get a chance to qualify for the Phase 2 playoffs, whilst the Titans are pretty much almost guaranteed a spot in those playoffs. So you have the opportunity to play for not necessarily a major, accolade, but you have the chance to play for some bigger prize money and a bigger boost to your team right away, rather than just having to build it up throughout one phase to go for one shot at Worlds.
How many seeds would he jump?
Yeah,
like that man jumped like 5 seeds. Like, yeah, I'd do it.
This week, I had the pleasure of speaking with my good friend Neilmah, the support for the Oni Warriors, talk about Phase 1 and Phase 2, and look ahead to Worlds as well. Take a look. Hey guys, I'm here with Neilmah, the support for the Oni Warriors. I'm repping a little bit here for my boy. Talk a little bit about Phase 1 and Phase 2, and talk about Worlds and his career on the whole as well. So we got to start with Phase 1. I think I took a peek at the standings at Phase 1 just before we started this interview, and
no. Don't look.
Not a great first phase for you guys. But you are able to make playoffs as the first seed, I guess, in the group, which is a bit surprising. Can you sort of talk about the expectations that you might have had for this team, going into Phase 1 in Season 8? Like, you must have known there were going to be some ping issues, visa issues by that time. Did that factor in to where you thought the squad should have been at Phase 1?
Well, before we knew that we were going to be playing a lot online, and before we knew that people weren't all going to be able to make it to the States to Georgia, our expectations were all top 3 at the least. Kind of thinking that out of the gates would be this powerhouse. We have a lot of experience across our team. Obviously, a really star-studded roster with no real weak link. And when we found out that we'd be playing online, and 3 of us would be at home for the first phase, that obviously curbed our expectations. And I think at that point, at least personally for me, I kind of defaulted back to I don't really care where we place as long as we're making improvements and we show potential. And it's not it's a good team environment. There's no frustrating, not a frustrating experience for anybody in terms of team environment. So our expectations definitely were just kind of, we're met in a lot of ways, but I think we also fell short in a few ways. I think that we weren't able to really find an identity for our team that well in the first phase, which surprised me. I thought that we'd kind of be able to ease in, figure out the meta, and find out how we wanted to play a lot easier than we did. But that all being said, I'm pretty happy with where everything ended up in terms of making the playoffs. Obviously, the Dragons got the better of us pretty handily, but I don't think we showed a great performance. But it was a good eye-opening experience for us as well. But all in all, I think that we were improving throughout the phase, which is really important, and I think that's something that we're still doing right now. So I'm not too upset with how the phase went. But that being said, I think that we all had higher expectations of how everything ended, even considering, in terms of standing at least, even considering the ping.
Yeah. After those first couple weeks, was there maybe a concerted effort to pick gods or do some strats to sort of mitigate or minimize the ping effect? I talked to Pigman Things last week, and I think he said, they're let's just try to do some simple wombo combos and things like that, just to make sure that even with the high ping, there is something that we can rely on to some extent. Was that part of the calculus a little bit for you guys early on in Phase 1?
100%, and it still is, to be honest. I mean, just people playing across the ocean, it's just tough. There's some picks that just aren't viable. There's a lot of things that I know and our players know that they're capable of doing that. It's just really, it's just tough.
Yeah.
It's like running track, and everyone else has spikes, and you're running in a pair of loafers or casual running shoes. It's just it's a significant disadvantage. So you definitely have to draft and play a little bit more cautiously in that way. And it's just tough too, especially when it hits late game and one mistake can kind of spell a disaster, right? It's tough in that way too, because one error, one late reaction, one anything like that, and your game can turn on its head. So it's definitely something that you have to cater around to, like other players are saying, and definitely something you have to be thinking about when you're drafting and when you're playing as well. Yeah.
So apart from the Valks, who basically have everyone in Europe, you guys, I think, have the most amount of people in Europe, at least in sort of the most consequential positions, right? The mid 3v3 is all on high ping. Is that something that you think was a part of the reason for maybe some of the struggles early on? Was just the uncomfortability of new players plus the uncomfortability of playing online?
I think that definitely played a big part of it for sure. But I also think that, especially through Phase 1, I think even if you look back at it, I think there were a few not that like the team environment was bad or anything. Our team environment's been really good, but people just get frustrated. It's just tough when you're
Oh yeah,
at
I
that
think.
level of play, like Fred and Dardes,
Mhm.
and you're like arguably the best players in your role, and then you're hamstrung so much, and you can't do what you normally do. It's just so frustrating, right? So I think that took a toll on our team just mentally, right? Just not
Mhm.
being able to perform the way everyone wanted to. And in terms of the confidence as well, I think people's confidence at times throughout the year have been low. And I think that has taken a big toll. But also, like you said, just having this new players, all these new players having to come together and build new chemistry, learn how each other wants to play, learn each other's tendencies, the ping, and then the 3-3 being on ping as well. It's kind of like this big culmination of these little things that when you put them together makes a much bigger problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was even apparent on the battleground how frustrated I think Dardes and Cuba were getting, at least early on in phase one. I do want to pivot now to phase two. And I looked at the standings for phase two. You guys doing a lot better than in phase one. Picking up a couple more
Yeah.
wins so far in phase two. You mentioned early on that you were basically just looking, once you realized things were going to be online, you're just looking to make improvements and show growth in the team. Do you feel like you've seen some of that growth come to fruition here in phase two? Are you feeling the team growth right now?
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. I think last week was a bit disappointing for all of us. I think up until that point we were taking a step forward every single week, and then last week I think that it kind of felt like a step back when we kind of got rolled by the Leviathans a little bit. But that being said, it's not like we view it as a just like a failure or anything. We learned a lot from that set actually, and I think it helped kind of open our eyes. Every now and then you need a little bit of an extra kick in the pants.
Yeah.
When you're making this linear progression, sometimes it's easy to get a little bit more complacent, even though we're not at the top or anything. But it's like okay, like we still need to be like back to reality. We still have a lot of things to work on. But I think definitely we've improved throughout the phase two. I've been a lot more pleased with our progress in terms of that versus phase one. So I think that we're really starting to find our own identity, how the meta should be played. I think our picks and bans are much cleaner.
Hmm.
I do still think, like obviously, like I said, we still have things to work on, but I think that a lot of the things that we had trouble with are kind of being ironed out, and now that those are ironed out, it makes progressing and focusing on the finer details a lot easier. Because before we're focusing on these bigger, in my opinion, kind of more simple things we need to iron out that are more kind of rudimentary. And then as we've gotten forward, now you can focus on like the little things that make a team really good. Just focusing on these little micro plays, these little tactics, kind of, and then just working out the finer details on team fighting, things like that.
Yeah.
Instead of having to focus on these big things, you can kind of nail it down and start working on things that make teams really great.
I do need to ask about the benevolence nerf. They took away your support item and sort of this
Yeah.
whole no boots meta and how we're seeing it transition into sort of a healing meta to some extent, I guess, in solo lane. So that's sort of like three questions there all in one. Whichever part you want to take, go for it here. Benevolence or no boots or healing.
Yeah, I like everything. The healing thing. Like come on, like get that get that out of here. Like no one likes that. You're playing Hello and Solo. You're playing Afro and Solo. You should have no respect for yourself. I said it. You have no respect for yourself. You're playing Hello. Like come on. Okay, but on a serious note, yeah, like the healing's just always been kind of lame. It's part of the game, but it's kind of lame when you don't have like a solo lane or being a tank. It's just kind of weird. And that's my take on that. But in terms of like no boots, I think that was a really good change for the game. I think it shook a lot of things up. I think it put a lot of different builds on the map that you would never have seen before. I think builds have been like the freshest they've been despite for most roles.
Hmm.
And part of that is due to the starters this season as well. But I think it's just really cool just having different power spikes nowadays too. I think it's really good for the game as well in the sense that junglers, when they were rushing boosts earlier this season, it was really oppressive.
Hmm.
So the no boost change, I think, has just been, in my opinion, at least, a really nice shakeup. Has really revitalized the game and given it a new flavor, which I think was good. I don't think you should have no boots forever. I wouldn't mind them coming back at some point, but at this point in the game, I thought it was a great change. Yeah, and in terms of the benevolence nerf, I think that obviously it was it was the strongest support starter, and obviously we saw it spill over into other roles because of how powerful it was. And I kind of like the nerf just in the sense that I don't think there should always just be one starter, right? Like
Hmm.
it was really boring when the only thing supports could go with Sentinels, and all the other rules had like 3 or 4 different, or like 2 or 3 other options. And then they buffed Benevolence, and there was no option other than Benevolence, and every
Yeah.
other role still had 2, 3 other options. So now there's a Benevolence nerf. I think people are going to be experimenting a bit more. I feel like it is obviously kind of annoying in the role because a lot of the strength came from passive gold, which I thought was really good. And I thought that catered a lot to more roaming supports. That's kind of a place that I've done a lot in the past, like not splitting as much as other sports. And whether or not that's good or bad is up to your opinion, right? But when
Sure.
I'm just running around the jungle and I'm getting passive gold, that was really helpful for me. It doesn't, fall behind as much. But when you have something like Sentinels, unless you're splitting waves all the time, you're not really getting good value out of that, right? So,
Right.
but I think it opens up a lot of opportunity for new things to be fiddled with, and new builds to be made, new stars to be made. So I like the fact that it's nerfed, but I'm not so sure how much I like the spot the supports are in terms of that. I think it'll probably be fine, but Benevolence really did just feel amazing. It was a really powerful item. Obviously a bit too powerful if every role is going to build it, but I'm sure every support like wishes they had that back for themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, so Ajax and Pawn, if you're watching, the subtext of that answer there is buff war flag, right?
I mean, you got to plant a flag now and again. You got to make your mark, and if you don't have war flag, like you can't do that. Like, come on.
Let's buff war flag, please.
Yeah. Why not? Why not?
I do want to ask about, and maybe you don't have an answer for this, but I think we sort of have been hoping that as many of the players as can will start to eventually come to Atlanta. And I know we were talking a little bit before this interview about sort of what your plans are, but do you expect to see more and more people end up playing on LAN as we get into phase 3 and closer to Worlds, or is the visa situation just too difficult at this point?
It's hard to say for other teams, but in terms of my team, it's not so much an issue of if, but it's kind of when. Like all of our visas have been approved. It's just a matter of when can you get into embassy and do an interview, basically, for them to actually like finalize your visa. Because
Right.
when you're from Europe, to my knowledge, at least with my teammates, they just kind of do their normal vetting of you. They just check your background, everything, and they approve your visa. But the final thing you have to do is go into the embassy and just do an interview. They just want to double check and make sure that you say who you are, that there's someone they want to let into the country, and that's kind of where all the backup is happening and all the bottlenecking. So everyone on my team's visa has been approved. It's just a matter of when your interview date is, and all of our players' interview dates are before the end of the year. So yeah, so if other teams have a similar situation, which I wouldn't doubt, you should definitely expect to see more teams have their whole roster come down like November, like by the latest November, December. So in time for Worlds, hopefully, like fingers crossed, obviously.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So yeah, for my team at least, expect this all to be there before the end of the year for sure.
Oh, that's great news. That's really good
Yeah,
news.
yeah.
I love to hear that, because I think it's just gonna immediately boost some confidence, right? Like you gotta
without
feel
a
that
doubt.
like Cuvo and Dardas, as soon as they get to Atlanta, are just gonna be like, yeah, let's hit the buttons now. So
100%. Yeah, they can't wait. Fred can't wait just to roll his face on his keyboard when he gets to America and just to go wild, So yeah.
I'm definitely looking forward to that. I want to switch over here to maybe talking about your career, and you are back-to-back champ, so maybe talk a little bit about Worlds. Now, I remember, I think you were on that Oxygen Supremacy squad that made that gauntlet run. I think Van and Kiki were on that team too as well, right?
Yep, and Skeledon and Data
Skeledon,
Remember.
yeah, Data Remember, yep. And I think, a lot of the conversation coming from that was about you. Sort of, you were a bit of the new kid on the block, trying to get into SPL along with Ven, and like Kiki had been a veteran at that point.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember, I think there was like an interview with you or an interview with Kiki or something like that, where someone said Neilmah is definitely going to be a World's winner or something like that. Did you feel, I don't know, but it's got to be a crazy thing to sort of hear some things like that, all the praise, and then finally you're a back-to-back champion. Is that kind of validating for you?
I had no idea anyone even said that, especially that far back. That's news to me, which is kind of crazy. But
Yeah. At least,
Back
my
then-
memory could be wrong. There's a very
I'd like to think it's right. That sounds about right to me. I know what you said, but now my memory's getting a little bit less hazy. That sounds about right. Yeah, but definitely, I remember back in that day, especially when I was kind of just getting to the SPL, a lot more cocky, I guess, in that way, where I'm just thinking like I'm better than these guys, like I'm as good or better than these guys. And then when you get there, you kind of have the realization like, oh, like there's a lot of little things that you don't notice when you're on the outside looking in that you have to improve on. And so it was a bit humbling when I first got there, but I knew the way I thought about the game was a really conducive way to winning, and I knew that I was good enough mechanically and everything. My decision making was good. Not that I didn't have places to improve, but I knew if I just had good teammates to learn from and just stayed the course, I would find success eventually. So I always figured I was playing quite well, and I always thought I was doing the right things. And then but there is a little bit of that in the back of your mind, like, are you even gonna? Are you really good enough? Like, are you really good enough to be as good as the best?
Mhm.
And I remember making my first Worlds, how exciting that was. Obviously on Trifecta, like had never played at Worlds, had never played an international team before, and just seeing how far we could go there was like, okay, like it's possible, but it's not easy. I mean, only one team wins a year.
Yeah.
Your odds are not good. And then I remember seeing Splice win that year and thinking to myself, like, what if that was like my one chance to win that year and like we just couldn't do it? Like, what if you never win Worlds kind of thing? Just because I just remember thinking like it's just so hard. You have to go through every single team and have to be the best, and there's just no way around it, right? It's
Mhm.
tough. And then obviously I remember winning our first Worlds, obviously was just first off, I was looking at the bracket. I remember thinking like, okay, like it's an intimidating bracket, but I just remember thinking like if you're gonna win, you have to be the best. You have to beat the best team. It doesn't matter if you play all three of the best teams or you play two worst teams and then the very best team. Either way, you have to beat great teams. Remember, yeah, that world championship, the one where we were in SK, just looking at the bracket and just thinking like this is stacked. We have to go through Splice, a favorite to win. Then we have to go through Space Station, like another favorite to win, second best team, presumably at the team or top 3 team.
Mhm.
And then we had to beat Rival, who were undefeated at Worlds, also like a top 3 team in that event. And you're just looking at that bracket, just thinking like, whatever, like take it set by set. Have to be the best team anyways. Let's just give it a go. And then obviously every single set just being an uphill battle and just
Mhm.
being fighting tooth, nail, and claw to try and get a win, and then finally winning was really, like you said, vindicating, right? And very and just such a pure moment. I remember, yeah, I was just thinking like all that work we had all put in, especially Steve, like just being paid off in the best way. A lot of that doubt, as a player, you have a lot of confidence, but at times obviously you have like that little seed of doubt. It's hard not to, right? Just think like wow, like we have so many struggles, and for all that to kind of come to fruition and be something that has the ultimate payoff, right, of becoming the champion, which is so liberating, I guess, in that way. It just kind of washed away all the doubt. And it's like, yeah, like you are who you think you are, and you
Mhm.
deserve this, and your teammates and you just achieved something great. And for that moment, you're kind of like the best team in the world. It's a very pure feeling, and like you said, just really affirming of yeah, all of your confidence and everything. Is it fake confidence, or are you the real deal kind of thing? So it's just very affirming for all of us for sure.
Yeah, and then of course going back to back, right? Like that's got to be
Yeah.
like doubling down kind of right on that affirmation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Especially because you kind of basically did it the same way, both times. I think hardest path in both of the world's brackets, both
For
years.
sure, yeah.
So and to be honest, I think you have to go the hardest path. I think the team that takes the hardest path pretty much always wins, right? So um, that's great for me. I love rooting for you guys. I was a big fan. Did want to sort of circle back to your career. We focused on Worlds a little bit. You've been playing Smite for quite a long time. I think back in SML, SEC, whatever it was called way back then.
Challenger Cup.
Challenger Cup, lot of
Yeah.
experience there. Now you have 3-4 years in the SPL as well. So a pretty long and storied career here in Smite. Do you have any sort of mentors that maybe helped you along your way getting into the SPL? And then on the flip side of that, any rivals you might have throughout your SPL career, or are there any players that came up from the SEC or the Challenger Cup with you that you sort of like beating more than other people?
I guess in terms of people who helped me, like mentor me and also get me to the SPL, definitely, in my opinion, the most important in terms of just getting into the SPL for sure was Kabam.
Mm.
I mean, I was really bad at networking, and I didn't really realize how important that was for actually getting into the league and just even getting a tryout, let alone a roster spot. And I just kind of lucked into becoming friends with him. I don't even remember how exactly we became friends, but yeah, me and him and old name Jacob Malfoy became friends on Smite. And Kabam had a stint in the SPL, and he's still a coach, obviously, so a very tenured coach. I remember when on that Oxygen Supremacy team, Kiki was like trying to find a support, and Kabam offered my name up, and that's how. And then obviously I ended up going to the Gauntlet and making a debut there, and really kind of making a name for myself with my performance. I played really well at that tournament, put myself on the map, and I think just about getting that foot in the door through Kabam to get Kiki to give me a chance. I don't know if or when I would have made it to the league. So for sure, Kabam, not only just as someone who worked, but also as a mentor as well, and as a coach on teams I had later on in my career, it was really helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think having that Oxygen Supremacy team as a whole, I think was really good as a learning experience as well. I think that's where I kind of first learned the style of play that I still like to play today.
Mm.
And I learned that a lot from Kiki and Skeely and me, Ven and Dare were kind of like kind of adopted that as well. I think that, but it was more so Kiki and Skeely for sure,
Mhm.
who kind of taught us that kind of style. We all kind of like adopted that style, and I think it was really really good for us to learn how to play proper Smite kind of before we got into the league. So those two guys for sure definitely were huge mentors to us. And then last person I can think off the top of my head would be Aurora too. I played on a team with Aurora for like a couple weeks. And I was playing jungle for his team, and I remember he had played obviously in the SPL before that. I think it was maybe season 3, maybe
Mhm.
this was happening. Before, right as I was switching to support, kind of that time I was still playing a bit of jungle, and I was playing on that team with Aurora, and he was just making these shot calls, and I wasn't used to them at all. He was just like, "Oh, let's group up and kill this guy here," and it kind of opened my eyes. I'm like, I didn't even know like that was something you could do. Like I didn't know you could kill this guy here. Like he wasn't safe there. Like in my mind, that guy's so far away. He's like, well, we're never killing that guy. He's like, go on this guy. I swear we'll kill him. And all of a sudden, we're all collapsing on this guy and like one shotting him. It's so easy. I'm just thinking like it opened my eyes. Just kind of like there's more to like this game. There's a lot I still have to learn because it was such a good play. I remember he was like Ymir, and we like blinked on Shadowkeeper so and killed him, and he was Athena. And I remember just thinking, like, I just had no idea that guy could die there. I had no clue. And it just kind of opened my eyes to, like, there's a lot I still have to learn.
Mhm.
And I should kind of try and keep an open mind and just try and keep, and just watch more of the players around me and try and pick up a bit more from the people around me, especially the people who have more experience than me.
Yeah.
And so I think that was like I don't even think he knows that that was like something that was so pivotal for me. But I remember that moment, I was like, so vividly, I was like, oh my God, like, I still have so much to learn. Because it's hard when you're coming up too and you
Yeah.
view yourself as a good player not to have a bit of a chip on your shoulder, right? So definitely playing on that team with the Roar 2 for a couple weeks was really good for my mentality, I think. Yeah. And then in terms of players I like to play against, I like to play against everyone, but I think more so I just like to play against people I'm better friends with. I like joking around with them, win or lose, and I like sending them messages when we're playing and things like that. So like I like playing the Dragons. I got a lot of friends on that team. My old teammates, obviously, I like playing against like Paul and Ronnie, and obviously Sam, he's on the Dragons too. But I have a lot of friends in the league. Everyone in the league is like a really awesome guy. So I just like being able to joke around with everybody and just have a good time. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I thought of one last question before we're done here. Do you have, or do you remember, was there like a welcome to the SPL moment that you had? You know, I was talking to my analyst this week, and we're talking about how Cyclone Spin just kind of bullied Stewart last weekend. You know, in between the tier 1 and tier 2s, and just like, you know, sort of Alice Stewart's maybe welcome to the SPL moment. You know, this is the level we're at. You got to get
Yeah.
here. Is there a moment that you might have in your career that stands out to you, or is it all a wash?
I think when my first SPL team was the Legions. I think by that time I had enough experience that I kind of had deserved to be there, and I don't really ever feel like I got like dominated or anything like that.
Mhm.
I guess off the top of my head, a couple times Splice. I don't know if there was Splice at that point, but they they kind of annihilated me a couple times, I guess. Like they played Naja like an Esh on me like every time, or like Fenrir or like something. And they'll just like you wouldn't build bees to support, they'll just grab you and run you back and one shot you over and over. So a bit that, but more so what I'm thinking of is I actually got into the SPL really early on in like season 0 on that Thirst team that was just abysmal. Like we were like just awful. I remember I played support for them for like 2 games or something like that. And we were just so bad. Like we were god awful. Like we had no leadership. We had like no shot calling, and like as a new player to jump on a team and support, especially that has no leadership, and nobody's saying how the game should be played, and none of the shot calls are decisive or good in my opinion. You just get creamed. Like I remember we scrimmed the Dignitas team at the time, and it was kind of the same thing that like when I said Roar was like, let's go on this guy. I had no idea you could kill somebody in that position. That was happening to me. I remember I'm like at my red buff or something. I'm like, I walked the long way around. I didn't walk by mid, so I should be safe here. And like 5 guys go on me and they one shot me. I'm just like, what do you mean I can die here? Like I took the safe route. How am I dead here? And I remember like that would happen all the time in the SPL. Like we were just getting creamed and I was just getting annihilated. And I was like, what is going on? We're just getting shut out. So back then, I was kind of like a welcome to the big leagues kind of moment. And then I didn't see it for quite some time after. Yeah, but I remember those few games I played just being just utterly hopeless. Like you'd load in, you would get killed once, and then it would be like the floodgates were open. Your whole team would be going like 0-20 or like, get me out. Like, oh my god, we're getting crushed.
Was it the Lazistoli Zappa Dig Squad from back in the day?
Yeah, it was. It was back. It was literally, yeah. It was like that iteration. That was when like Shing was on Smite and all those teams. I think maybe Weekend hopped on Smite or Snipe for a little bit.
Sure.
Like oh man, like the OG SPL season 0, like there was 5 angry men and stuff, and we were just getting creamed. We were getting creamed, man. It was a disaster.
Yeah. All right, I'm sort of all out of questions here, and that means it's time to ask. Who's inting in your scrims? Who you trying to call out? And then
it depends. Like sometimes I'm not gonna like I'm a notorious running it down at least once a day. Just to show my team that, like, if they're getting a little bit sassy, like I will run it down, and you will be sad. Like, come on. Like I'm the old guy on the team now. I got all this experience. You should be listening and just soaking in my wisdom. Just sit back and watch. And if not, I'm gonna be running it down. But for the most part, our team's pretty good. I mean, every now and then someone's gonna be running it down. Everyone's a bit liable to do it. I would say the biggest intern scrims on our team probably is me, to be honest. Yeah, but our team is just everyone just has a great time. We have a good environment. Everyone likes to joke, and even though sometimes like I'm running it down or someone else would run it down, everyone's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah,
it's just kind of about keeping like the team environment like up. And if you have like one bad scrim, like no one really cares, right?
Sure. What about any shout outs? Got any shout outs for people?
Yeah, shoutouts to all my teammates, obviously, and my coach Chuck. Everyone's been great on the team. It's been a lot of fun getting to know Nika, Dardes, and Vote. Obviously, they're a bunch of great guys. So shoutouts to all my teammates. Shoutouts to them too for putting up with my 1-inch scrim game a day. Shoutouts to everyone at Hi-Rez this year who's putting in a lot of hard work behind the scenes under hard circumstances. Everyone's doing their best, and I know everyone gives them a lot of trouble a lot of time, but I mean they're out there trying their best. So shouts to them for helping all of us out as players and making sure the league runs well. Shouts to you and people like you in the community who make Smite a better place, make more content, just add more entertainment and value to the game itself. It's always great to see people taking an interest in Smite and just trying to help out the community. And everyone else who supports us and who's just been cheering for us. Yeah, thank you guys very much, and I hope that we can get some dubs. And I mean, so far the script is kind of on point for me. It's kind of going the same way the last 2 years, so we're looking good.
Okay.
Yeah, and just thanks to everyone for supporting us.
Yeah, best way to support your favorite Smite player, favorite SPL player is shop.smiteproleague.com. Gotta pick yourself up a nice Oni Warriors jersey, or a nice Oni Warriors hoodie.
Mm-hmm.
I think
a couple of them maybe.
Yeah, maybe get a couple of them. Do you guys have a like a signature other item? I know that the Dragons have the sleeve, and there's a onesie for the Valkyries.
Yeah.
What
got a sweatshirt, I think. Like, yeah, nice little sweatshirt.
Nice.
I'm not sure what else we got. I think that's could be it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, be sure to check that out. Shop.smiteproleague.com. Thank you so much, Neil, for joining me. Wish you the best of luck in the rest of Phase 2 and Phase 3, and of course, going into Worlds as well. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Let us make our picks here for Week 7. Let's start with you, AlphaJackal, here with the Olympus Bolts versus the Solar Scarabs. Who you got in this one?
I've got the Bolts winning this one. Talked about it before. I think Bolts bounce back this week. Scarabs, they still need 1 or 2 weeks to get everything sorted out in that roster. They're probably looking at a quick 2-0, probably 25 minutes each game, I'd say.
Myflin, who you got in this one? Bolts or Scarabs?
Yeah, I'm going Bolts. I was gonna crack a joke that AJ was brave for voting for the Bolts, but no, it's just probably right.
Yeah, I'd say the Bolts is the safe answer, but honestly, like depending on their mental fortitude after their 2-loss streak, you never really know if the Scarabs are going to go on that hot streak. That could be like the 3rd loss for the Bolts, but no, I'm not going to go for it. I'm going to go for the safe answer and say the Bolts. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Scarabs pull an upset.
Oh, so you think like
everyone
2-1?
questions the Bolts.
2-1?
Bolts 2-1.
Bolts 2-1. Okay.
We'll do that.
Giving the Scarabs some signs of life here. Myflin, let's start with you on the next set of Week 7. The Leviathans versus the Tartarus Titans. Who you got in this one?
Yeah, I've got Leviathans 2-1. I think that they are just such a consistent team, and the Titans are improving rapidly, but I'm not sure that they're challenging the top just yet. I think that they're in solid contention for maybe taking out a top-end team inside of the Camelot Kings, but Leviathan's slightly out of reach for right now, but Titans improving. I'll give them their 1.
Totally?
Yeah, I think that the Leviathans probably have the best picks and bans out of most other teams, at least to me personally. And I think that's kind of where the Tartarus Titans kind of struggle. And depending on where they're going to go with their jungle, like if this is still a consistent thing with layers, or if they're practicing with other junglers during scrim time, valuable scrim time, I think that Leviathans have a slight edge coming into this matchup. So I'm going to give it to them 2-1 as well.
AJ?
Is it difficult set to call this one? I think Leviathans are the favorites for this. I'm actually going to go with a spicy pick. I'm going to say Tartarus Titans 2-1 this one.
All right, Tartarus Titans 2-1 versus the Leviathans. Totally, let's start with you on the next set of Week 7, which is the Camelot Kings versus the Valhalla Valkyries.
2-0. I mean, the Kings are riding an absolute high of beating the Bolts, right? Like, and the Valkyries are still Valkyries. You know, they almost won 1 game of 4, and the other 3 did not look really clean. So there's still a lot to be changed for us to even have a little bit of confidence predicting these sets for the Valkyries, right? So 2-0 Kings.
AJ?
Quick and simple, 2-0 Kings, just like the set will be.
Yeah. Myflin?
Okay, I think the Kings are going to 2-0, but I bet Ducky gets 1 solo kill. That's my little side hustle here.
Yeah, that's the...
No shot.
That's the...
You don't think he gets 1 solo kill?
No, it's not against variety.
3 times.
Dude, listen.
Nika 3 times.
No. Because here's what happens. Nika is like the first victim to Ducky, and then all the other soul laners see what happened to him, and now no one's gonna get soloed by Ducky. So
No, you're not soloing variety when he's picking hell and going breastplate first item. That's just not happening.
All I'm gonna say, if the SPL was on DraftKings, I'm taking that prop bet every time. Okay, it's got good odds. That's a bet I'm putting somebody on. Okay.
But also, like, I actually rewatched those solo kills of Ducky versus Nika, and Nika brain farted a couple of those solo kills. Like level 2, Ducky got really fortunate, or I guess you can say he's really skilled about using his Osiris passive because he timed it in such a way that as the wave approached the lane, he got the 8th tick to be able to phase through the minions and kill Nika at level 2. And then at level 5, Nika brain farted because he kind of came up to the lane to use his barbed spear. And then all of a sudden, Ducky blinks and uses his tether. And then Nika's brain shuts off. He doesn't use his 1 to generate enough rage to transform. He walks away back into his tower. Instead of leaping away, he gets stunned and ultied and just dies the whole time. It was just like really
Let's go,
weird to watch.
Ducky! Let's go, Ducky!
Did everyone make picks for this one? Kings versus Valks?
2-0 for all of us. Even if we didn't
Yeah.
vote, I'm willing to put it in for them.
Sure. Let's go on to the next set of the week, the Jade Dragons versus the Oni Warriors. I think we're back at the beginning here, so AJ, why don't you start us off?
Jade Dragons looking stronger and stronger again with each week after their dip in form. I see them just jamming this set as well. I think that's going to be a 2-0 to the Jade Dragons, but Oni Warriors definitely putting up some resistance.
Miff, who you got in this one?
I'm going to say 2-0 for the Dragons as well. I mean, it's the Dragons.
Yeah.
Full stop. It's the Dragons.
Tully?
Yeah, I think that it's safe to say Dragons 2-0 in this one. I'm expecting a little bit more Whirlwind action, being a menace to society in this mid to late game. It's probably going to be a battle similar of Jade Dragons to Leviathans, this Tiamat versus Morgan Le Fay. Both Dardas here and Whirlwind are really heavily preferring it. We'll see if there's any other spicy picks. It's going to come down to basically picks and bans as to how the game is going to get influenced, but I'm going to say Dragons 2-0.
Sure. Let's start us off here with the Oni Warriors versus the Solar Scarabs.
This one I think has a little bit more intrigue behind it. I'm still favoring the Oni Warriors, but I think it is going to be contested. I wouldn't be overly surprised if the Scarabs did somehow bust out a win, but I think it is going to be a 3-game set regardless. So, have to lock in a answer. I'm going 2-1 Warriors.
Tully, who you got in this one? Warriors versus Scarabs.
This one's actually hard to call, like just looking at it, until we see the matches earlier on that week. Like depending on how the Scarabs played against the Bolts and how the Warriors played against the Dragons would give me a more accurate answer towards this set. But without those sets in mind and how these teams performed last week, I'm going to guess that the Warriors are going to win 2-0. I still feel like the Scarabs are still going to take some time to ramp up, but if the Scarabs pull an upset against the Bolts and Warriors struggle against Dragons, I think that momentum will give Scarabs the win, but safe answer, Warriors 2-0.
AJ, finish the top here. Oni Warriors versus Solar Scarabs.
I would say right now that the safe bet would be Oni Warriors winning that 2-0. 2-1 at a push, depending on if Scarabs get some momentum going up against the Bolts.
All right, Tully, who you got between the Atlantis Leviathans and the Camelot Kings? This is going to be a good game.
Yeah, it's really rough because both of these teams are looking really solid. It's hard to root against Zapman. Obviously, me and him going way back. But the way the Kings is kind of shifting the meta, it's going to come down to how the Leviathans did their homework and the picks and bans going into it. Are they going to focus outright in the solo lane? Are they going to lean towards the mid lane potentially and try to shut down BMT? It's going to be a spicy set. I'm looking forward to this set. Also, the long lane matchup should be interesting. I'm going to give it to the Leviathans 2-1.
2-1 from Tully. AlphaJackal, who you got in this one? Levi's versus Kings.
I am going to give it to the Leviathans 2-1, mainly because whilst the Kings are trying to implement this new meta and implement sort of bringing tanky mages and guardians back into the solo lane, their predominant pick being Hell, you can't go up against a team that has Panatom in it and expect to play Hell and get away with it. They'll have the exact playbook to shut down this Hell, and they'll utilize that.
Finish this off here. Levi's versus Kings.
I am operating under the assumption that the Camelot Kings have one more healer in their back pocket. I think that AJ is right that if they do rely on this Hell out of the solo lane that has been so successful for them so far in recent weeks, it's really going to struggle up against the Leviathans. But the Leviathan's strength still is their late game team fight. And unfortunately, in Smite, if one team just has a healer and a strong one, that is going to significantly sway the late game in your favor, I would say. So if the Kings have an Aphrodite, a Chang'e, something like that ready and available, or maybe we just see something completely different from them, I do want to see them keep running with this healer identity. It's going to be very hard for the Leviathans to find an answer. And it just feels like to me something the Kings are doing. It's from the brainchild of Biggie, just spewing healers into our meta. I think that that is very likely. So I'm going to play devil's advocate and say 2-1 to the Kings, who again are my favorite to win Worlds as well.
Sure.
Nice.
All right, AJ. Let's start with the Titans versus the Valkyries here. Is this pretty easy 2-0?
Yeah, pretty easy 2-0. Titans 2-0. Not much really more to say about this. Hopefully the Valkyries are able to capture some of the form they had in game 1 this week and prove us all wrong, but I just don't see that happening right now.
Myflin?
I'm assuming.
Oh, okay. I think that yeah, this is tough, right? I think that again, I am going to favor the team that is largely favored, Tartarus Titans, but side action, Ducky's going to get at least 2 solo kills in this set.
It's 3 during the week.
No shot, dude.
Dude,
No shot.
100%. Or
I'll
at
take
least
that $5 bet any day of
One
the week.
solo kill and 1 gank assist. That's what I'm thinking, actually.
You got 5 on it?
Yeah, I'll put 5 on that.
Okay. 5 on it, but he gets 2 kills, you said?
Yeah, 2 kills inside the landing phase.
2 solo
inside
kills?
its lane. Yeah,
Solo
2
kills
solo
or ganks?
Okay, 1 solo kill, 1 gank assist kill.
This
But it has to be in 1 match. So either game 1 or game 2 before the Titans kill the Titan.
I think Totally is still taking that bet.
Yeah, the easiest $5 in my life, dude.
Yeah,
you
Myth,
could just sub to my Twitch. Easy life.
Myth, that's just with the Totally, right? It's not with Twitch chat entirely.
No, Twitch chat, hold that. This is just us.
Totally, who you got in this set? Titans versus Valkyries.
I hate going against the Valkyries because I like the players within them, but it's just too easy of a set to call. Like, Titans are going to 2-0 them. It's going to be pretty scary side. I think that the solo lane matchup is their strongest suit, and everything else is just going to collapse in the early game.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully you'll make $5 here, right?
Easiest $5 of my life, dude.
Myflin, why don't you start us off for the last set of Week 7 here with the Jade Dragons versus the Olympus Bolts. I think this is also another. I think that you guys called this the set of the week, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that this is 100% the set of the week. I mean, it's the Dragons on the rise versus a recently struggling Bolts who finally have shown that they're human. That's going to be so fun to watch. But that said, I don't think that they're entirely human, the Olympus Bolts. I'm sure that they're going to be bouncing back here, and I'm thinking they're likely going to have a ton of confidence rolling into this one because they didn't really have to prep too hard for the Scarabs, I have to assume, which means that they're going to divert all their intentions instead to this Dragon set. I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a hard-fought battle. No matter who wins, it's going to be a 3-game set. But I'm favoring the Bolts here. Gotta go with the tier list.
Totally, who you got in this one? Dragons or Bolts?
The Phase 1 finals rematch, right? That best of 5. It went, all 5 games, if I'm not mistaken. And off of the last week, Bolts struggling. The momentum and the confidence that they're going to get from the Scarabs win might not be enough to face off against the Dragons that is running on a high as well, depending on how they play, obviously, against Oni Warriors. That comment you made earlier, Myflin, about the scuffling over or just getting rid of the mindset of the Scarabs, I think could hurt the Bolts. You have to really prepare for that team because they're good enough to actually pull a victory. So if they take all their time to focus on the set, then maybe, Bolts can win 2-0. But I think that the Dragons are too much on the high right now that they're going to win this set. I'm going to give it to them even 2-0, the set. Dragons.
AJ, why don't you close us out here for Week 7? Dragons versus Bolts.
It's really difficult to call this set. I'd say this is probably one of the most difficult calls that you could make. Based on what we saw this week and what we saw this week alone, I'm gonna give it the edge to the Dragons 2-1, but it goes either way 2-1. I'd say definitely a 3-game set.
Thanks for watching the SPL Rundown on twitch.tv/SmiteGame. Be sure to catch us every week here before SEC or SPL airs. And, if you want to see extended cuts or past episodes of the SPL Rundown, be sure to catch us on YouTube. Just search for APAM Productions. If you have any ideas for future guests, feel free to DM me on Twitter at APAM2 or at APAM Productions. And finally, I want to give a big thanks and a shout out of appreciation here to my analysts here. Why don't you guys shout yourselves out? AJ, you can start.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. You can find me on Twitter at AlphaJackal, Twitch at AlphaJackal as well, and that's where you can find me.
Myth?
I'm gonna assume that's me. Hey, I'm Myflin. If you want, you can follow me on Twitch, twitch.tv/Myflin. I'm not as cool as AlphaJackal, so if you're on Twitter, you have to type Myflin TV to find me there. Other than that, make sure you guys are following and subscribing to youtube.com/SmitePro. We've been putting out a ton of really cool content recently, and it'll be a treat for you to watch.
Definitely a treat. Totally?
Loving that content that you guys are putting out there, by the way. But you can definitely find me on Twitter, IG Anatoliy, or on Twitch, just Toli.
Yeah, another thing, please support our favorite SPL players and teams, Get some nice SPL merch. I'm rocking a Oni Warriors jersey here. Shop.smiteproleague.com. We love supporting all the teams and players in the SPL. And go support your favorite players as well. Thanks for a lot for watching, and we'll see you guys next week.